Introducing AirPro Diagnostics' revolutionary calibration technology, Augie. AirPro Diagnostics' latest innovation is a game changer in forward-facing camera ADAS calibrations. Augie is a wireless compact device that allows you to calibrate vehicles anywhere. AirPro has created a theater-like environment to digitize and miniaturize static ADAS targets and present them to the forward-facing camera exactly as required by vehicle manufacturers. Find out how required calibrations can be simplified. Order your Augie today.
Welcome to Shatterproof, the Auto Glass Journey for Independence podcast. This week's episode, the industry pricing benchmark, Is There a Future for NAGS? With guest host David Leach, Chief Operating Officer of Don's Mobile Glass. If you haven't already liked our podcast, click on the subscribe button below. Also, take a moment to like this episode, so anytime we update the content, you'll be the first to get access to all of this great media and industry information. So with that, let's get into the show with your host, Gary Hart, and guest host, David Leach. If I go back to the days, it would be 2005, and we all got that fax and email saying, hey, we're rebalancing. I know you jumped in at that point and said, whoa, wait a minute, you're halving our prices? How is this, supposed to, you're at Tiger White at the time?
That's the second time. That was the second time that happened. Okay, the first time it happened was in the 90s. Because there's a story, because you want to talk about Chicago Group and you want to talk about pricing. We got to be careful about how we talk about pricing, obviously. Yeah. But there's an origin story to that whole thing that leads us to kind of where we are today, that I think is really important to recognize, because I don't think a lot of people know the story.
No, go right ahead. Yeah, because I'm picking up at 2005. I came into the industry at 2001, obviously with eDirect Bill, eDirect Glass, Tim Smale days. So you have that first look at the NAGS.
Okay. So
go ahead.
Traditionally, from a NAGS standpoint, when I came into the business, I came into the business in 1985, working in a warehouse. I never left. Worked my way up through, I've been with 3 companies. Krieger at first, and we grew the hell out of that. And I kind of reached the end of 22 years there, had every role in the building, up to running the business, helping run the business, whatever. We grew it really well. We were wholesaler and retailer. One of the largest in the country. I went to work for Belron after that. But I really didn't go to work for Belron. I went to work for West Topping. And I actually went to work for West Topping without ever seeing one of his stores or visiting anything. That's how strong of a personality he is. And that's how well regarded he was in the industry. And I spent a lot of time with him through the Chicago Group, where we actually went roadshowed. We went to, went and saw Safe Light, went and saw Ford, went to saw State Farm, saw a bunch of different people. Plus, we spoke at the industry events and fought these wars with NAGS. But from a history standpoint, NAGS gained their position in the industry by basically applying a formula to the lowest common denominator price available. So in general, it worked like this. New car comes out. Somebody gets the contract for the glass and offers it to the aftermarket. The OE would put out a truckload price. A truckload price is the unit of sale, the starting point that you buy at if you buy glass 600 parts at a time. Okay? It was the lowest common denominator of how anybody could buy. So the OEM, whoever got the contract, would publish their truckload price. NAGS would figure out who the OEM is. And this is all black box stuff. They never said anything. Brad Brush, Catherine Howard, that generation of people. But they never acknowledged the formula. But we all knew the formula. Okay, so if you figured out who the OEM was, you could predict the NAGS price. And basically they took a formula by category: domestic tempered, foreign tempered, domestic windshields, foreign tempered. There's a different divisor for each one. You divide by that number, divide truckload price by that number, round up to the next nearest nickel, and there's your truckload price. All the other suppliers, as they reverse engineered the parts, would fall in line with that truckload price because that's what they had to do to be competitive. If you were a distributor, then depending on your size, you could buy somewhere south of that truckload price because you're buying more stuff. But the core unit of sale was a truckload price. Truckload price doesn't exist anymore. Okay, so that was thing one. So NAGS publishes based on that. That's what the calculator was. They also assign a part number, which has no distinction whatsoever. And if you go back to that 2005, I wrote an editorial on that, which I can't find, but I wrote an editorial and I said, what exactly does a NAGS number represent? Does it just mean it'll go in the hole? Or does it make some characteristic? And the reason that I did that, so this would have been back in the 90s too, because of 1061, and I think it's a 1092, which was the non-solar version of a 1061, which was the APV, the ugliest vehicle ever produced next to the Aztec. But, you know, it's 5 feet tall. PPG was the only one that made the windshield. And the windshield was like $350 at truckload. Okay. All of a sudden, offshore comes in, and it wasn't a 1092. I can't remember what the number was. I'm getting old, I guess. But they come out and it's a non-solar version of it. Okay, well, the air conditioner doesn't work if you put a non-solar in it. So all these people get these parts and they're $60. Giant windshield for $60 that has no solar characteristics whatsoever. NAGS gives it a part number. It never went in a car. So I asked, what the hell's the difference? What does it denote? Does it denote fitness for purpose? No, obviously they're not going to answer that. Okay, well, does it do this? You know, does it denote some characteristic? All from what I gathered, and I never got an answer, but from what I gathered, all it means is it's a shape. It's a shape that fits that application. It could be made out of freaking cardboard for all they're concerned with, right? Okay, fine. Just so we know, because it was really confusing. The problem with NAGS was twofold. One was in the early days, labor wasn't a thing. Okay, so everybody kind of knew that the list price represented this margin. Okay, all parts were between X and Y from a price standpoint. Very seldom did you get anything that was outside the pale, right? Probably $60, $50, $60 was truckload price on average. All of a sudden you come up with heated windshields. Well, heated windshields, which Ford was kind of the pioneer of that, going all the way back to the 70s, but Ford comes out with a heated windshield for a Taurus and throws this thing together. If you take the truckload price that the heated windshield has and you divide it by the same number as the 1097 has, guess what you get? You get a $1,200 list price. The economies or the math that works for the rest of the industry doesn't work with that anymore, because now all of a sudden your retail price is higher than the dealer price. List doesn't work. So that's not going to work. So it started with that, but inner shield windshields, which were terrible, those came out, and it's the same thing. You start getting these value add pieces, and then you compound it with moldings where PPG would manufacture the glass. Note I'm using their old name, their dead name. PPG would come out with the glass, they'd send it out to an encapsulator, and then buy it back from the OEM, and then put a truckload price together for that. So you ended up with something like 1036s and 7s were one of the early ones where there's value add to it, and then it gets to go back through the system, and then they reprice it, and now all of a sudden you have an unrealistic list price for that. Industry clamors, something needs to be done. Insurance companies are raising hell. Everybody's raising hell because the math doesn't work. Because if you've got a part that's got a $1,200 list, or let's say you pay $200 for a part. If you pay $200 for a part, you're willing to take a lesser percentage markup on the $200 part than you are for the $20 part, right? It's just math. Because at a certain point, it's too much. Compound that with the fact that the industry has always been semi-retarded on how they approach labor, where labor was free. I mean, one of the original prices when I got into the retail business,
still
40
is.
40 off, no kit, no labor. 40 off, no kit, no labor was a common price. That was a retail price in a kind of a budget store. No kit, no labor. And then there was like $10 times NAGS. And there was like, look, it costs $50 an hour to put a guy out there. Even if you're paying him 20, 25, by the time you load him in and you calculate in dead time, it's $50 an hour to run somebody on job. There's no way around that. And that's minimum. So the industry's like, well, labor's not right. So I'm thinking early 90s, like 93, 94, couple things happened. First, PPG decided to come out with their own list price because NAGS wouldn't publish off of their inflated truckload. They just wouldn't put a price in. So PPG said, okay, and this is when they were at the height of their powers, when PPG was the adult in the room for the industry, right? Nobody did anything unless PPG did it, right?
Right.
And at the time, I remember him complaining because we were pretty close with him because of the links thing and all that. But I remember him saying, we don't make any money at all. And I'm just laughing. So they came out with their own list price as a direct challenge to NAGS because NAGS wouldn't publish what they wanted to. Everybody, all the distributors, just put exception lists in their calculators. When we handed out calculators, you put exception lists, and that exception list continued to grow and grow and grow. Something needs to be done. And I can't remember if it was Bud Oliver or who got this brain, you know what, it might have been Doresis with PPG when they kind of reached this thing where they go, okay, here's what we're going to do. We're going to cut the list price by 2/3 and everybody's going to sell at list. And everybody in the industry went, no, don't do that. That's a terrible idea. Fix the problem, but don't do that. Because the industry is not, at the time especially, probably 92, 93, probably 20% of the industry was computerized. Seems, this is when I start feeling old. Maybe 20%, maybe right. 20%. EDI was not yet a thing. USA Glass was beating people, USA Glass beating people over the head. All of these things are going on. And the sophistication level at a lot of the mom and pop glass shops, which was 80%, 90% of the glass shops in the country, were, family owned little guys. They were just little guys. And guess what happened? They cut it by, I believe, 60%. I can't remember the exact numbers. We were back, and at the time, the 40 off, no kit, no labor, that was a thing. That's where we started. We dropped to like 10 off or 15 off or something like that, as it was the standard price. And then within a year, we're back to 40 with 30, 40, 50% of the money pulled out of the industry. And we still had exception lists. So in the early 2000s, they said, hey, let's do that again. And it's like, I was young at the time, but still, you don't have to be a grizzled veteran to understand history. And it was like, hey, maybe we had to look at what happened in the 90s when we did this, when we sucked the money out of the business. Right. They were going to do the same thing. And the larger guys that have the benefit of resources and time to look at this stuff in detail and get granular with it and things like that kind of did this. This is a bad idea. Over that time frame, and they did it anyway. We're all going to sell at list price. No, we're not, because there's always somebody that discounts it. Okay, so that's one problem. One problem is the list price methodology was silly, because now you have variance in part pricing from $20 to $700 at the lowest common denominator pricing. And it's more of the parts. 90% of parts used to be between X and Y. Now, 90% of the parts are between B and Y from a pricing standpoint. So the same math doesn't work. The list prices are out of whack.
Originally, though, who came in and said, so NAGS has this list, and that's great. But who came in and said we should start discounting off of that? Was that the early networks like Globe Amarada or somebody, or what?
No. It was pre-network. Discounts were a thing as long as I've been in the business, and I got in 85. And the reason discounts were a thing is because the list price was very high. And it covered everything. The list price covered everything. Nobody sold at list. And the average retail price was anywhere between 10 and 40 off list. The average glass shop could buy anywhere from 60 to 80% off list. The spread was what they made. That's how it worked. And it kept order, right? But what it didn't do was prepare us for a world where computers are a thing, where net prices are a thing, where per part prices are a thing, and where 75% of the products sold in the US is now offshored. I don't know what the number is, but that feels right.
Yeah, it's about that high.
It's a whole breakdown in unit of sale. The whole unit of sale calculus has changed. So none of that prepared the industry for that. None of it prepared us to actually charge a correct labor rate. Because there's nobody can straight face say $30 an hour or $28 an hour for labor is fair. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Go to a body shop and say you're willing to pay $28 an hour for labor. Walk into a dealership. What's the shop rate on a dealership? 150?
Yeah, but
they're not being unreasonable.
They post their rate on the wall, and they recognize their certification and their worth, and they fight for it with their consumers and the insurance company.
But the whole thing is the glass industry is different because we're getting all of our money in the part. That's where all our money comes from. Labor's just it's an add-on thing. It's part of that. It's part of that whole thing. That's no longer the case. They've taken all that out. It's all gone. So labor's labor, parts are parts.
And that's what the 2005 rebalance was about, correct?
A bit, but the other piece of the equation didn't happen, right? The other piece of the equation is the labor rate, because in 2005, what do you think shop labor is? $60 an hour, $80 an hour, maybe? I mean, in a normal auto business, I don't know. I don't know what it was.
I think it was much lower. I think it was still in that $35 to $60 range, and especially
outside the glass business.
Oh no, outside of the glass business, no.
Outside the glass business, because we're auto service guys. Ultimately, we are selling auto service, all right, in the auto glass business. Therefore, and with the technology going the direction it is, urethane is a big deal. Okay, urethane and calibration are the two biggest things that have happened in my 40 years in the glass business. They are the only two great big things that have happened in my 40 years in the glass business. Game changer type things, evolve the industry level things. Urethane increased the requirement for the technical side of the business tenfold. And the industry kicked back against it, and you had people doing a little of this. And I had wholesale customers that were proud of the fact that they mixed their own primer. No shit. It's completely accurate. They brag about it.
Wow.
Their testing was, I put two pieces of glass together and I couldn't pull them apart, therefore it's good. And you still hear some of this, right? I haven't had a leaker in 12 years. That's not the science, dude. That's not what we do. Okay? We're doing structural work to vehicles multiple times every day in a challenging environment. We are calibrating cameras. We are, and the difference with calibration now is, hey, before, if we put a windshield in poorly, if somebody used a chemical system in poorly, guess what happens? Well, if they get in a wreck and they're not wearing their seatbelt and there's an airbag situation, and the person looking at it smart enough to see that the whole side of the windshield blew out and the airbag didn't work, we could have a problem, right? With calibration, if the guy turns his cruise control on, you can have a problem. There's a big difference. And I have no problem, and I think most of the glass shops in the country don't have a problem accepting that level of responsibility, but they need to be paid for it. They need to, the prices in the industry for these services and this level of expertise are at least as valuable as body shops, at least as valuable as the dude that changes your oil at the dealership. It's the same level of service. It's the same level of work. Well, this industry, it's never been treated that way. And it goes back to an inflated NAGS list. So directionally, were they correct in reducing the list price? Yeah, but that wasn't the problem. The problem was devaluing the other parts of the job that are not list price related, that are not part related. So in a roundabout way, the Chicago group came around because NAGS severed their tie, apparently. Again, this is all black box stuff. They don't tell you anything. But they severed their ties from the truckload price. Okay? When you sever your ties from the truckload price, now you're taking surveys to unnamed people on how much they can buy a part in a certain area for. And then putting whatever formula they want, because the formula wasn't consistent anymore. So there's large distributors that provided pricing. There's small guys that provided pricing. They put it all together in the blender, and then they spit out list prices based on what they felt the market price for the part was. Which in and of itself, if the industry granted them license through utilization to do that, okay. That's not what happened. The industry granted NAGS license, standard, whatever you want to call it, to use this list price in transactions based on an entirely separate set of numbers, an entirely different methodology. And by reducing and changing and saying, yeah, we're not going to give you that, we're not going to do that, what we've ended up with is it's kind of like people that hijack a certain event to promote their own cause, right? Without getting into politics. But you know what I mean? It's like, but this isn't the foundation with which this was built on. You're putting stuff in here that doesn't, this isn't how you got the job. You know what I mean? Right, and it's kind of like the IGA thing. When the IGA was really going strong, that hey, this is the thing. This group represents the independent auto glass trade, and then they changed it. You hijacked it, not you. The
people
Minnesota
will say
guys.
that though, but they still think I work
no.
for Safe
No. It was the carcass was stripped by the time you got it.
Yeah, dead on arrival on the side of the road. Yeah. The
fact that you still got it going is pretty freaking impressive, really.
Thank you.
But you know what I'm saying? They take it under one set of circumstances and then change the agenda. And everybody went, wait a minute, we can't do that with NAGS because NAGS is interlaced between the manufacturers because of the part numbering. So we're going to PIDS committee and all that crap. The manufacturers, the insurance companies, et cetera. The only people using NAGS list right now are insurance companies. Everything else is cost plus. The whole industry is cost plus, and has been for almost a decade. Because
and
the
really
list price.
To that point on insurance companies, based off of cases we've seen in the last 10 years out of Florida, South Carolina, North Carolina, Arizona, insurance companies in depositions, their claims administrators will cite that they know little to nothing about NAGS and will refer to their third-party administrator who's saying under agreement, that's the pricing methodology is list NAGS and taking a discount from that. So that's
because
what's
they don't know
weird
how else
about
to do it. How else are they going to do it? There is no other way to standardize, I guess. Use dealer list.
Well, and that's what gets thrown around. So from what I understand, how is the Chicago group going to address that back then? what was the methodology behind that?
Okay, so we see this devaluation, but the sever between manufacturer's price and essentially what felt like Bud doing whatever the hell he wanted to do. No offense to Bud, I like Bud, but they had their methodology was no longer transparent. In fact, it didn't make sense. You'd look at thousands of parts and you try to find something, and it just didn't make any sense whatsoever. So what the Chicago group started out as and ended up as actually was a group of people that I think there was 12 of us, maybe 12 companies involved, maybe 16. I can't remember. The website, you could probably hit the Wayback Machine and look at the website. Came up with, okay, pricing, list pricing, that type thing needs to be logical. It needs to have a connection to the lowest possible or the closest to manufacturer possible price as a starting point, because every layer you put into it adds a differing level of markup to the situation. So if you take a part that, we'll just use round numbers because I don't want to get into too much, but if you take a part that has a $10 manufacturer cost, they're going to put it out there for $20 as a truckload price, right? They might sell it for 18 to a guy that buys a whole lot of them, but it's $20. That's the lowest common denominator. If you go to a distributor, they're going to have a markup built into it. And then you apply a formula to that, you end up with a markup on a markup of which you can't control. So we wanted to go back to factory truckload pricing, or as close to factory pricing as possible, with the OEM manufacturer having the nod on what it is. Okay. It starts there. Then we had various things that were what we considered reasonable from a distribution standpoint. Here's how much it costs to get it into the field. Here's level one, and then you add this for this. And then you apply that in terms of a formula. The formula slides based on part value because of the outlier thing. You're willing to take lesser percentage on this. So there was peaks and valleys, right? There was caps. There was a top end and a bottom end. So, it costs proportionally more to get a $5 part into the field than it does a $500 part into the field, right? It's the same dollar amount, more or less. It's just the percentages are completely different. So in one case, you're going to take the really cheap stuff and you're going to add this back end expense to it on a general basis to get a starting point. The starting point, then you look at what could be considered a markup. And that's all it is. It's just, here's a starting point for this. This is not an unreasonable, so you could sell it at list or whatever. It's always based on the fact that you add labor at a reasonable price or at a competitive price, not $10 flat or some ridiculous number. Like, it was always based on that. And then the piece that made it work was it was third party. The industry didn't do it. It was an independent, audited third party. We hired what at the time was a Big 8 accounting firm to be the administrator. And I can't remember who it was at the time. We spent a lot of money on this thing. We never unlocked the part number thing. We did discuss with NAGS the possibility, informally, the possibility of them using our price. Third party calculates the price. We didn't touch it. They assemble data. They apply this formula, which is pretty, I don't know, did I send you the white paper on it?
Yeah, I have the white paper on that, yes.
Yeah, so that was kind of my, okay, here's what it's about. That was the idea. Put some benchmark numbers in there and create a benchmark price that the industry can fight over, right? Whether somebody wants to discount it, whether somebody wants to add to it, whatever. But it's consistently calculated across parts. So you didn't have this one where you'd make a huge margin on part X and you'd be upside down on part Y.
Right.
Third party does it. We didn't touch it. Because that, you have to have credibility. And when you get into pricing across an industry, that gets really, we had lawyers at every meeting, every single meeting. We self-funded. the vast majority of it. We got a little bit of money here and there from other people. We spent every dime we ever had. We got some momentum. We had, at one point, we built the website at Krieger just so we could show everybody on the map. Everybody liked the idea. But at the end of the day, it died of apathy because nobody cared. Nobody cared. It's, hey, we like this idea, but it passed. And different things happen. You know, there's the rumor, oh, everybody sold the Safelite. That's not true. People just moved on. Some people sold the Safelite. Burkhauser sold the Safelite. West sold the Belron. Carl Osdike died. It just, things happen. And
did you have Paul from Guardian behind it too?
Paul Janice was involved. I can't remember. I was trying to think through this on my way back to the office on everybody that was involved. And Migrant was involved. We were involved. Wes was involved. The City Glass guys were involved. Steve Mort, who was our CEO, was my CEO now, was involved. That's where I really got to know Steve. And Tom Miller from Iowa Glass. And I think he's still got a glass shop somewhere in Monkey's Armpit, Oregon, somewhere, just loving life, man. It's where old glass guys go.
Well, I know at one point, and I think it might have been either Glass Bites or AGRR back in the day, they threw out a number that you guys had garnered almost 1,600 supporters.
Oh yeah, it was on the website. I had a US map with the dots on it. We enjoyed doing that, and we just went through this because we were at Krieger. We started a company called IBS, which is still around, and ended up as a point of sale provider. But the initial thing with that was as a combat to USA Glass, and that became Lynx. So we just been down that path, but with the IBS stuff, we had such a good time because we literally went door to door and got people to support it because they were losing their identity to the 800 number and stuff like that. And the whole thing with that was keep independents independent and let independents market who they are instead of just being a generic at the end of an 800 number call from a network. And that, like I said, turned into Lynx, better or worse, but it did. So we'd done that whole, crowdsource type thing.
Right.
So we did the same thing with Chicago Group and got people to sign up and put their dots on a map, and we had coverage across all 50 states. Everybody liked the idea. Nobody wanted to pay for it, and there's a cost.
No, of
right?
course not. Right.
Big 8 account, big 8, big 4, whatever the hell they are now, but they don't work for free. Data collection and stuff. We were talking to a fairly high-placed industry person with a lot of experience in that business, without naming names, to join and run it. We had all of that in place. What we got from the manufacturers was apathy. From the insurance companies was, yeah, but what about this? What, we don't want to pay more. We don't want to pay more. We don't want to pay more. That would, and that was fine. I mean, they're doing their job. But what we said was consistency. So what we were preaching was the consistency where this is actually representative of what a part sells for in the country. But it's based on the origin price, not off whatever they came up with. And it's not done by the industry, it's done by somebody else. That costs money. Costs money to do that. It's kind of like it's like NAGS, but there's no revenue stream. It was a not-for-profit, and it would continue to be a not-for-profit. We never isolated the part identification thing. That's what all the manufacturers were worried about. We talked about Eurocode. We did some rough ups where, theoretically, I'd like to be able, as a glass industry guy, I'd like to be able to look at a vehicle, know about 3 pieces of information on it, and be able to determine what the part number is. Just by looking at it. That's possible, especially possible now. Where you've got a make and you've got a model and you've got a body style and you've got value add stuff. And these are all just extensions. That's kind of the way Eurocode works, but we never got past that. It just kind of fell away because the industry kind of lost focus on it because there were some checks that had to be written. And it wasn't a big enough problem that anybody really wanted to get behind it. I do know that some of the manufacturers put some money in to help us, but that wasn't based on their appreciating what we were trying to do as much as we were their largest customers and we were asking for things and they kind of didn't have an option. The largest retailer wasn't opposed to it. We were face to face with them 2 CEOs ago and sat down with them. Wes and I talked to them for a while. They appreciated it too because consistency helps them.
Sure.
All
absolutely.
we were trying to do was bring some consistency to it. And over time, it just kind of faded. It was just we were ready to go. We were going to produce our first thing, and nobody wanted to pay for it.
So a lot of people think at that point, it's because you went off to Belron and Belron started acquiring other members of the board's shops and there was some other acquisitions. So a lot of people in the industry feel that it was by design because if you believe the conspiracy
it had nothing,
in the industry.
Completely unrelated. In fact, one of the first things I did when I started with Belron was briefed Lebner on what we were doing. And Wes had already been in his ear, but Wes had just sold. So Wes sold about the year before I came over, year and a half before I came over is when Wes sold. And when I came over, it was we were talking about it and Gary always liked the idea. Belron did not have any issue with the idea because again, consistency is really important to any business. And the more stuff you do, the more consistency matters, right? Predictability, consistency, things like that. But the path forward was very murky. And I think over time, some of us got bought out, some of us remained independent, but my position, I did Chicago group stuff when I worked for Belron for about the first 6 months. We were still operating. That wasn't it as much as just kind of an overall apathy to the situation, as well as after 2 or 3 years of that, the industry's moving more and more toward net price. Everything is cost plus. Everything's moving to cost plus. As of late, it's been less. I'm blown away because the last few of these seminars, the bloodbath always used to be the NAGS seminar.
Yeah,
it was just
especially when John Gilmartin was up on stage promising the whole world, and then the next year it was take it back. Yep.
It was so ridiculous. But prior to that, going back, I remember we were in a hurricane, and Wes and I were smashing NAGS. We were just saying they don't do this, they don't do this, they don't do this. Here's what, and we had a full house. They're bringing chairs in. There's hundreds of people, and there's a hurricane coming. I remember that whole show. It was crazy. And a few years back, 2-3 years back, we were in San Antonio and I go to the NAGS thing and I look over and there's a certain industry member literally sleeping in the NAGS presentation. And it was the most boring thing ever. They said nothing.
Well, and I think that's because that we've gotten used to and I don't know if it's kind of twofold. One, in my opinion, the show has protected those that exhibit or have been around. And so when Gilmartin came out on stage the year prior and said, hey, here's all the greatest things Mitchell's doing. And then people are like, who the hell's Mitchell? And then he gets to the NAGS part, and people are just sitting there going, oh, NAGS is finally going to be online. But if you want this other vehicle data, you could get it from us or hope your point of sale vendor can license it and subscribe it to you. And then the next year, all of that got pulled back. Gilmartin was terminated somewhere in between there because he made promises or statements that were false.
He was not.
But the show protected him. And I can tell you, I got that call at the end, how I diminished the value of the show by broadcasting Gilmartin's seminar over the internet at the time, or on
See,
Facebook.
My take on that is, I just from the standpoint, I think that at the show they rolled people out and it was wide open as far as people getting up and just unleashing hell.
Yeah.
And you'd hear it because at the time, look, there's a 20-year stretch pre-calibration where you had to have all of your stuff together to make money in the business. To make money in the auto glass business, you had to be exceptionally good about it or you're starving. It was tight. And right or wrong. And people whose life and business depended on it would look at some of the things that Mitchell was doing at the time and go, you are killing me. You are literally killing my business because I'm forced to use this across the whole business. That's gone away. The only debatable point is insurance. Everything else is cost plus.
Well, and that gets to the point. So I think we've heard Catherine Howard, Bud Oliver, Jesse Herrera, James Patterson. Let's not forget him. Yeah. He was sandwiched in there. He was a character. And then John Gilmartin all make the same statement, which basically is something to the effect that each glass shop is to determine their own formula for pricing, which may or may not have anything to do with the NAGS benchmark. So I take that and and it was said year after year in a publication at a show, but then I go back to a Glass Bites or AGR interview with Gary Loebner about supporting the endeavors when you and others had come on board with Belron, and his whole, to sum his statement up, was he's about bringing prices to the point where it's reflected and the industry knows how they're put together. So it's interesting that here's Safelite, who dominates the insurance market, had a legitimate complaint about how NAGS benchmark pricing gets put together in secrecy or in some befuddled way. And at the same time, they've done nothing to move the needle. So it seems that it's advantageous to them to have NAGS pricing. But then Mitchell says, no, the rest of the industry should either come up with their own, ignore the benchmark, not ignore the benchmark. So it's kind of like there's all these mixed messages. What is a glass shop supposed to do? Or what is the industry supposed to do going forward? I mean, where do we see NAGS? Because I mean, honestly, a shop is paying $1,000 a year for a NAGS license now. And the editorial, you'll hear Bud Oliver say since he left, the editorial quality's gone down, but it was already going down prior to that. Missing labor hours, incorrect OE to NAGS numbers, $0, and we're 5 years now on certain vehicles that it's still no NAGS list price.
Okay. Primarily,
Safelite makes it up when they send
and you've got to wrestle with them. Any company, any network, any whatever, you're going to have to wrestle with them from time to time on things. We look from our standpoint. We look at the overall value of a job. We look at what it would take for us to do something different and go through what it was. And the math is always in favor of, you know what, we're doing okay here. Because for the most part, I would rather sell a job through the network than sell it cash. Now, from a financial standpoint, just from a price standpoint, they're closer than they've ever been, for sure. But there also is enough meat left on that bone in the majority of situations to where we're fine. And I think there's some that we miss for sure, because we do a lot of jobs, and there's some that get through that, God, we just got killed on that. But we're also in a different position where we're able to buy properly and we're able to buy in large quantity and we're able to do enough that we can wash that stuff out. So for us, it's a little different situation. Right? It's what do I have to put in to go a different direction? For the guy on the street, I think it's a tough deal. And I think it's always been a tough deal, but right now it's tougher. And I'm trying not to go down paths that I shouldn't go down simply because I shouldn't from pricing. Pricing, I'm I'm preconditioned to not talk about pricing after getting beat up by lawyers in the Chicago group for years. People have to make business decisions, and they have to decide whether something's worth it or not. And there's different pathways to that, whether it is direct billing, whether it is not taking insurance for certain jobs and creating customer pressures or things like that. I think the biggest thing that we found that's effective is we don't use that. We don't treat that as a stop. Our job is to differentiate ourselves from the competitor, be it large or small, and provide a level of service, quality, and price that matches the service that we provide. You get into the no deductible states, and you get into even going back as far as George Corporal and that whole giveaway stuff and it made us look like thieves. And if at the end of the day, if you're going to sell part X to a cash customer for $200 when he walks in, and you're going to try to sell it for $1,200 to the insurance company, all you're doing is giving them cannon fodder for pointing at you and going, see, that's the problem. That's why we have to do things this way. So it's credibility. It goes back to what we were talking about with a more professional industry. The more professional we are, the stronger our voice is. Right?
Because we've had examples of both big companies. There was one based out of Salt Lake City that was king of Groupons in multiple states, hawking anywhere from $90 to $200 replacements.
Yep.
And, that ultimately ended up being rolled up and acquired. You still have your point, the $0 deductible states still offering free dinners, cash back on insurance jobs, but they will, when a cash job comes along, you get absolutely nothing other than we're giving the glass replacement to you for $200. And then the insurance company says, well, we just did a pricing survey in the state and we found that the average job is $200. It's really hard.
And the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, true. Yep.
It's always going to be somewhere in the middle, right? There's always going to be the lowest price provider, always. There's always going to be somebody that's going to do it cheap. They're going to build their business around doing it as cheap as they possibly can do. That's viable. That's a valid business process. The consumer decides whether or not that's acceptable to them. On the insurance side, when you're building your marketing budget you're not marketing, essentially, or you're marketing something that you're funding by inflating a sales price, that doesn't do us any good either. That doesn't help either way. You can't rationalize it. I can rationalize every price that we have in our business. Everything that we sell for, I can explain why that's not a ridiculous, or whatever you want to call it, price. And notice I'm staying away from, quote, fair and reasonable, end quote. Fair and reasonable's, I'm doing a good job not cussing. I'm not going to cuss. Look, if you call 10 places and you treat the low-end guy as the low-end guy and the high-end guy as the high-end guy and say the truth lies somewhere in between, you're going to get a range of prices. You're not going to get a price. You're not going to take the $100 windshield or the $120. You're not going to take the $2,000 same part thing. It's somewhere in between. I don't think that mystery's been unlocked yet. And I also think that probably the NAGS benchmark gives a little bit of that, but there is no transparency. We don't know what it's based on. Nobody knows what it's based on.
Right. And they will just keep coming back and saying, hey, we published this benchmark. If you want to use it, use it. If you don't, you don't.
I mean, it literally could be, hey, what do you want to make this? Let's make it this much. It has no relevance to what's really happening with that part. No. Or how many suppliers there are for it. If someone's got 2 suppliers on the planet, obviously there's going to be less of a variance in price, right? But when everybody makes something, when there's 12 suppliers for a part, you're going to get everything from the cheapest thing possible all the way up to the OEM level one, which, by the way, matters in some cases and doesn't matter in other cases.
And a lot of shops, I see it on social media. I get the phone calls and the emails. Shops have this belief that the price in NAGS is the price they should get. And again, it's arbitrary. It's a benchmark. It has nothing to do with it. So when they say they're not making money anymore, I heard you use the word budget. So in Don's Mobile Glass, you have a whole gross profit margin. You know your net. You know what your expenses. You go in with understanding accounting. And then you have a shop that just goes, well, I used to get X, but now I only get Y. But then if you go in, I always say, well, go look. Did your supply cost change on it? Yes or no? And if it did, by what percentage? So now take those two and look at it. Oh, I'm looking at your math. You're still making a net profit of like 38%. That is a really good profit margin for a service related business. But here's some areas where you could do better. Your labor is wrong for your market. You're discounting. You have expenditures that you shouldn't have. But shops aren't treating it as an accounting center. They're treating it as I see it on the screen, but this is what I should be making. And at the end of the day, they don't know.
And at some point, those two numbers don't rationalize. Using a benchmark, which is maybe kind of sort of related to something. I mean, there's got to be some loose affiliation. And I knew, like I said, I can quote you this is ground into my soul. Domestic windshields in the old formula used to be truckload divided by 0.2463. Rounded to the nickel. OEM truckload divided by 2463 rounded to the nickel equals NAGS list. 2392 was foreign windshields. 2222 was domestic tempered. 302618 was foreign tempered. That's a piece of useless information that will never relieve itself from my brain. It's just in there. But what it provided was consistency. Okay. Sure. The market does what the market does. You take that list price, no matter how, quote, ridiculous, end quote, it is, and the market will do with it what it does. But it's all has the same basis, right? So 60 off of a ridiculous list price is going to mean the same thing as 40 off a ridiculous list price for a different part, or 60 off. It still works out to the same math, right? Yep. And then it's free market. You can sell whatever you want. You can sell it at 10 off, 20 off, 40 off, 60 off, 50 off, list price, list plus, whatever. But somebody making a value judgment that this is what this part is worth is bullshit.
Yeah, well, I don't even know that it's even a value judgment, because to their statement is it's some sense of fair price according to market trends, cost of data collected for actual retail prices from both retail and wholesale providers. So it's a sense. You have a sense. I have a sense. It doesn't sound like it's actually correlated on maybe anymore on actual data. I can't imagine they're doing any type of pricing calls or gathering data on wholesale and retail.
Maybe they are, but the sample size is so small and the geographical influence is going to be so small in the overall scheme of things. If you think at every different application, the complexity level of a certain item, the car park age, the market that they're in, the conditions, all the stuff, who supplies the area, the retailer you're talking to, all of these different things matter. And there's no way. It's not possible. I mean, I'm in Modesto, California. I could call 5 different people, get 5 different prices with a 50 to 60% variance in Modesto for one part. What's right? The answer is they're all right, because they're all based on what that person needs to do that. They're not using a list price for a collect. P.S. Nobody would quote off NAGS. They do their cost plus thing.
Nice. Yeah, that's good, because and a lot of shops are afraid to do that. And then I get shops that'll say, well, I don't do that because I know my competitor is on a better pricing scale than I am, but I do more volume with that supplier. And I always say, well, you got to go back to your sales rep at the supplier and say, get me on a better terms here, because
run your business.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. Don't just sit there and go, oh, Gary's shop, is buying better than Don's. So what? Don's is going to sit there and go, oh, damn that Gary, he got a better deal. No, you got to take action and stop buying from that supplier. That's the thing.
No, you get
It's
it.
crazy.
You get a new supplier.
Yeah.
Or you negotiate. Or you change your math, or you're doing something wrong, or you look at your cost structure, or you do one thing. You don't change the market price, you change your price. If you have to raise, if I took a 10% increase on product across the board, I would raise my price by 10%, and I would fight holy wars with networks to rationalize that. Would I win? Sometimes. Sometimes.
And then, and something that NAGS hasn't really ever covered is recalibration. What are your thoughts on shops and how they should position themselves? Obviously, they're investing in tools and infrastructure, employees. So when it comes to just their overall health of their business, what should be their number one goal for setting their pricing? Based on labor, based on a component of labor and their investment? How should the ROI be looked at?
Well, it goes back to what you said earlier. You got to know your math, right? You called it accounting, but you got to know the math. You have to know that equipment isn't free. You have to know that TI isn't free. I mean, each one of our facilities, we've fully embraced calibration, and we've been in it since 2017, where we really said, okay, this is coming. And since day one, we have disconnected the pricing from a standard matrix, because our primary calibration station, which is in kind of our flagship Don store, we've got probably $250,000 in development in that.
Wow.
Between the equipment and the TI and stuff like that. The other ones are about 100. Great investment. Okay, so from a pricing standpoint, we treat it like everything else. You look at what the competition's doing and you make a decision. There are people that calibrate less expensively. There is no one that calibrates better than we do, period. That's it. We make business decisions based on what the market's doing. You have to understand what the competition is doing and what they offer. The guy that's trying to sit something on the hood of your car and calibrate in a cul-de-sac with your car halfway cockeyed is providing a different service than us. I don't care what they sell it for. That's not our math. And so far, we've been fortunate.
So we know like statics and dynamics can be different in the amount of time, what it takes, more targets, less targets, more calculate, whatever. So is that one price fits all model to say our statics are X and our dynamics are Y, our dual is this? Or should it really be, well, if it's this class of vehicle, we're going to price it this way? How should a shop look at that? Is there a better way to do it? Or is, to your point, do what's best for your market?
90% of what we calibrate will fall under that static is X, dynamic is Y. That's based off of an average labor time, a fair markup, an R&I, the R&D side of things where we have to offset the investment, all of that combined, plus what the market will bear. Okay. So you mix all those things together and you get it. Yeah, it's this much. That's a fair price. If somebody's offering, so we do stuff for other people in the industry, not glass shops, but body shops, things like that. That's kind of on a trade price thing. It's just like a wholesale. It's just like a wholesaler deal, right? Yep. But if you figure, I'd challenge that a dynamic is every bit as expensive as a static from a labor standpoint, because you got a guy driving a car, and technically you should have more than one guy, because the guy driving the car shouldn't have the damn tablet in his hand, right? It's like a two-man job. Yep. And we've always bucked up against this when we get asked, which we get asked a lot. We do a lot of walkthroughs with insurance agents and things like that, and show them the trade, show them the industry, show them how it works at the state that we're at, right? Which is arguably better than anybody else that we've seen. So, including the big guys. So we're like giving them information they didn't have before, and invariably the price is, well, how long does a calibration take? Well, it takes anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour and a half to 2 hours to 4 hours to all day. If you minimize the amount of errors or the amount of opportunities for error, aka controlled environment. All of these little factors from temperature to level to lighting to distortion to things on the walls. If you minimize that, you're going to minimize the opportunities for errors. But I've seen guys arm wrestle with a calibration for 3 hours when the fix was 3 minutes. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
And you learn this stuff over time.
Social media helps.
So how much is that worth? How much is it worth to have that experience to be able to knock this thing out in 20 minutes when it could take your competitor 2.5 hours because they got a box of something out in front of it, or because the camera angle's wrong, or because the body shop sprayed the bumper a little more heavy than they should have, which obscures the radar and all. There's a lot. The answer is it's what the market will bear, but we won't sacrifice what we know is top of quality. I mean, you don't get your eyes checked in your driveway. Why would you do that for your car? When you can turn your cruise control on, and if you're a few millimeters off, or if the calibration fails, your adaptive cruise is going to suck you into a car behind you, or worse. So why? That's the path we've chosen. Everybody needs to choose their own path. I'm not taking anything away from what people are doing, because the fact that we're getting away from the whole flat earth thing, where people say, well, I don't need to calibrate it because I don't unplug the camera. It is. It's flat earth. And there's still people out there that do it. They do it that way. They say those things. But for the most part, the industry said, yeah, you kind of got to calibrate that. Right? Would you put your kid in the car with a dude that said, yeah, I didn't unplug it. It's just hanging there. It's hanging, right? And it's like, yeah, I put it back in and it's good. It's ridiculous.
Well, and at the same time, they're the other half of the money-making equation, they're just ignoring. So you got the glass replacement. So now make the money on the calibration, and invest in the tools. And if you don't, invest in a relationship with somebody who does, and get a cut for a finder's fee. But to just say, I'm dangling it, I'm putting a white piece of paper in front of it.
That.
It's ridiculous, It's
like it's the same mentality going back to the Tauruses in the 90s. Your first Taurus, 1097, but 980, where people go, yeah, I mean, they're sitting on butyl, or they're sitting on silicone, or they're sitting on something like that. I mean, we were belt and suspenders guy because we were going to be sure, because we didn't know, because the industry, the education wasn't there, right? So we used a urethane bead with a butyl back because we wanted both, not knowing that urethane as a moisture cure product, the butyl bead was actually retarding the cure, and the glue at the time, I'll call it glue. We're using Sika. It wasn't Sika at the time. It was Sika Flex, the 280, UR280, old stuff, or 414 from the artist formerly known as Essex.
Yep.
but we're using that, and we're putting a butyl back behind it, and it was never curing. It would take a year to cure, and the shit, at best, it took hours to cure, even if it was all perfect. The technology has advanced so much now, you would no more do that. Or mixing primers was a big thing too. Again, I mentioned a guy earlier who mixed his own using isopropyl rubbing alcohol and carbon black. He found that to be the logical formula for a successful primer, because he couldn't pull it off the windshield after he glued something to it. This is real. I mean, this isn't me just making up shit. This is unbelievable.
No, and that's what the industry, a lot of people in the industry believe.
We used to
use the same thing.
We used to use Essex urethane. This is way back. We used Essex urethane, but we used Sika primer because the 206 came in these big bottles that were easier to manage than the Essex ones. So we used Sika primer with Essex urethane. I would no more do, none of a rookie fresh out of one of Jacques' classes would look at us like we were insane if we said do that, right? So What's happened over the course of what's now, 40 years, Yeah, no, 30. 30 years, what's happened over the course of time is the knowledge has crept up. And you see guys that are more or less doing it right. More or less. There's always going to be exceptions, but the lowest in glass shop is still at least giving some cursory understanding, for the most part, to chemicals. And I think that gives us hope, right?
Well, and I think that has a lot to do with the adhesive manufacturers having feet on the ground.
And I agree with that 100%. And the calibration business is following that same line. The difference is it's like a free-for-all for calibration suppliers now. Everybody's throwing in their 2 cents worth and wheeling in 30. Think about this. You've been in the industry a long time. You got guys that are looking at multiple options for $30,000 machines. You couldn't sell a freaking cold knife at one of the shows 10 years ago. How much is it? $60? No, that's too expensive. Now they're looking at giant machines. It's crazy.
Yeah, and everybody's either a dealer or they're a representative to sell it now too. So you got every corner of social media has somebody ready to sell you a system.
Absolutely. Well, we're a distributor for launch. But we're a distributor for launch because we help them initiate the product and get it into the US, and we use it every single day a lot. So we kind of got some workarounds that we've learned over time that we're willing to share. There's some money in that. And again, it goes to that, it's the give back thing. Okay, I don't promote it. I honestly don't care if we sell them. It's not our business, but we do because people want it. But I think this information piece, so I said there's two. Urethane was one, changed the industry. Calibration's two, it's changed the industry. Absolutely. And the acceleration of understanding and adoption of this technology is multiple times faster than urethane. It took 20 years for urethane, and you'll still go out and find guys that aren't doing it right. If you call 2017 kind of the dawn of the calibration age.
No pun intended.
And you go 20 years, fast forward 20 years, I'd say the same level of industry understanding will happen in 10 years. It's double. And it's because there's more money in it. There's actually a profit center if you choose to take it. If you choose to do it correctly, it makes all kinds of sense. And it's coming at us like a freight train. It ain't going away. Okay? Right now, average car on the road's 2011. That USA Today number. Average car was, I think, 11 years old last year. Average car on the road. Manufacturers decided they couldn't make cars for a while for chip reasons and all kinds of reasons. So that means it's even older.
Yep.
You get into 2017 and beyond, and there's instances before, but 2017 and beyond, there's an exponential increase in things that need to be calibrated. Up to 2023, it's probably 80%. 80% of the cars sold have some feature that will need to be recalibrated at some point. There's no doubt. There is no disputing it. So where are we at as an industry when you go from whatever the calibration rate is in a specific area to 80% of the cars on the road now fall into that bucket of things that had calibration features on them? It has to be addressed. I think what you're going to see is people that go, oh, I can make a lot of money on this. And they're going to open up calibration thing. That's going to create price pressure. You're going to have people that try to fit the technology into the way they choose to operate versus fit the way they operate into the needs of the technology. You're going to see that. You're already seeing some semblance of it. And without going down that rabbit hole, we've looked at everything and we feel that we're doing it right. Could you do it different? Could I calibrate? We don't do mobile calibrations. I mean, short of dynamics, because by definition.
Sure.
But we don't do it because we've looked at it and we've looked at every conceivable thing. Could we? Yeah, you could do it. But you're opening the door to error. And error is the killer because it's labor. It's all labor. It's equipment, but over time, the efficiency with which you do the work at the correct level is going to determine your profitability on it. The guys that are good are going to be good. The guys that are bad are going to be bad.
So just to be clear, because people will jump right on this topic, you're saying that it's not that it can't be done. It's the level of efficiency is so much better in a controlled environment because it's less error prone than if you're in an uncontrolled environment, whatever that may be. Because there's a lot of people out there that will jump right on and say, I can mobile calibrate all day long, but their mobile calibration may take 2 to 3 hours because of errors.
Or might fail.
And then, they have to start all over again.
You absolutely can. You absolutely can calibrate mobile. You can calibrate however you want to a degree. But just because you can doesn't mean you should. And we have chosen as a business that we want to minimize errors as much as possible. We want to minimize potential for error as much as possible. That is physically impossible to do outside of a shop that's built for it.
So it's better for the customer because you get them on the road faster, potentially. And then it's better for you because it's better return on investment. Your labor is being used more effectively.
And more efficiently because they're not chasing errors. Because if they have a problem, there's somebody to help. Because it's not the lighting. It's not the angle. It's not X, Y, or Z. And, Jacques better suited for this than I am. But
sure,
I get the concept. The concept is simply minimization of potential errors. And you can have a perfectly executed calibration in a cul-de-sac. You can also have a nightmare that wouldn't exist if it was in the shop. What it requires is two things that people are they're going to get defensive about. One, you got to have a shop. A lot of people don't want to have a shop. But I'd say now, more than any time in the industry, an in-shop environment is more important. The technology on the installs, on straight installs, is getting to the point where you're doing body work on cars. Body shops don't come to your house. Okay, it requires a paradigm shift. There's a paradigm shift in the industry that we have to offer mobile service first. People will bring their car places to do things. We proved it. We do the vast majority of our work in shop, and we do a lot of work. But that starts with how you answer the phone. It starts with explaining to the customer. Because unless you're in Monkey's Armpit, Kentucky, 80 miles away from the shop, a customer will say, oh, you need my car for a couple hours. Okay. Because they're only going to get it done every 5 years. Right. Of course, they take their car everywhere. Can you imagine? Call the dealer and say, hey, my transmission's slipping. When can you send a tech? You'd break them. They wouldn't know what to do. We don't do that. We need to think like auto service businesses because that's what we are. The closer we get to that, the more established we become, the more reputable we become, the more credible we are. And I'm not saying there aren't a lot of good mobile guys, because there are. There's a ton of really good businesses out there that run out of a truck just fine. But given choice, why wouldn't you? I mean, I'd much prefer to work in a shop environment because that's where my stuff is. That's where my people are. We have a little bit different deal because we're full line. But at the same time, it's a chance to show off your stuff. It's a chance to compete with the big guys on a like basis. It's a chance to extend hospitality. It's a chance to connect that customer to you. So it's not a question the next time. That's an opinion. Again, there's a lot of really successful mobile only guys. Absolutely.
Well, and even for the mobile guys, they probably don't think in terms of scale. So I'm perfectly happy with maybe 1 or 2 vans. My other technician takes it home. I take it home. My wife or somebody is hired to be a CSR, and it works well for them. But they never think that maybe I can go lease space and then have signage up and then have a bay for pull through and I can have 3 employees. Yeah, run like a business, right? Yeah, and every time that seems to come up in the industry, it's like, well, hey man, I got into this to pick and choose. Well, okay, you still need to represent the industry, so there are some things you should do and can do, but one of them would be not to dump on those that say, we're going to have this environment, we're going to have a storefront. And I think we see the pendulum swinging back where even, SafeLight is pulling mobile out of certain markets because they're saying people have to come in anyway. We're not going to do the calibration mobile, so come into a SafeLight store.
Right.
Yeah, that paradigm shift is already happening for them.
We don't calibrate mobile and we don't do replacements that require calibration unless we calibrate. We will walk from that job. Because we have the ability to do it, but two, because there's no waiver. There's no, oh, you're going to get it calibrated later, sign here, we're safe. No, last guy that touches it loses. You can't sign a piece of paper that says, oh, by the way, I'm disabling a safety feature. Sorry, you're not going to hold me accountable for it, because consumers aren't great at certain things. And follow-up is something they want to get their product or get their job done or get their car fixed or whatever the hell it is, and they want to move on down the road with life. We have inconvenienced their life. This is, oh my God, my windshield's broken. Now what do I do? Well, let's take care of the whole thing. They're not going to go, oh, now I got to go get it calibrated. They won't do it. And we're left holding the bag, no matter what we have them sign. It's not safe. And it's the wrong way to do it. It goes against our ethics. It's a weird time right now, but it's a good time. Like I said, I don't have a problem competing against anybody because we position ourselves to compete against anybody. To the people that are entirely reliant on one category of customer, be it insurance, be it fleet, be it whatever. Now, fleet, if you're going to be a fleet guy, you have to structure your business around fleet. Mobile service works in fleet. If you have established customers, you can have a place to calibrate. You can set it up, where you can create a controlled environment. Dealerships, some of the rental car guys, but I mean, we do a lot of work for major rental car companies, and on calibrations, they come to us because we have a store that's in close proximity to it. Will we offer pickup and delivery? Yeah. And we charge for it. But overall, if you're relying on insurance only to run your business, to make your world go around, you are putting yourself into a position where you either have to do what the guys that are independent billing do, which is a ton of work. A lot of guys are really good at it, for sure. Or you're at the will of a network, whatever network that is, and you have to deal with this price that we've already determined has no relevance. Sometimes it's really good, sometimes it's really bad, sometimes it's somewhere in the middle. You're basing everything off somebody else's control, where if you build your business balanced, you can control your environment more and it becomes less of a factor. You can pick and choose. You can do a little bit better. But to do that, you have to do something called marketing. You have to invest in your business. You can't just get a phone number and expect people to call. And I'm seeing more stuff with the tech group and stuff. You see, guys, there's a lot of really smart people in that group that Larry's freaking one of them. He's as good as it gets, and he has been I've known Larry for a long time. And for all of his strengths and weaknesses, he's really good online. He understands how to market his business, and he always has. I'm seeing more people like that understand keywords and understand AdSense and understand all of this stuff that a new business person has to. But there's also an equal number of people that say, the networks never send me anything. Well, that's not their job, dude.
No,
go get the work. Make a sales call, for Christ's sake.
No insurance company, no TPA has any obligation to send any shop anything. No, even when you sign that piece of paper, there's no. They don't even promise you anything in that agreement. When
you're talking about the big one, I think people say, well, it's unfair and it's under. It's only. You can always come up with steering. You can always come up with things like that. But part of the problem with that is we put them in a position to be able to do that. The people on program accounts, the USAAs, the closely held stuff, they want as many jobs as possible to go through that provider. That's their method of operation. That's how they do it. Okay. You know what goes against that? When the customer says, no, I want to take my car to Don's Mobile Glass. That's how you fix that. And you don't fix that by bitching about it. You fix it by participating in community events and putting a nice store down and being part of the community and making sales calls and approaching people and talking to people. You have to combat steering with steering of your own. That's the only way you fix it.
And you speak of Larry. So the other strength that Larry has offline is he also will take those risks to build the infrastructure, which is bigger shop, more bays, investment in branding, the community involvement. So it's one thing, you almost have to be the Swiss Army knife of all of these facets if you're going to be a small to medium sized operator. Yeah.
But you can't just hang a shingle and expect people to show up. It doesn't work that way. You have to go out and solicit business. You have to go try to get people to come to your store. Whatever your gimmick is, whatever your trick is, whatever your USP is, you have to take that and run with it. You can't just say, I'm on the network, where's my work? They never send me anything. Well, I don't want to send you anything. Okay? That's their version of it. We have boots on the ground, availability to connect with people, agility. Agility is huge. We will do things that they cannot do. They are not structured to do it. That's how we succeed. We win everywhere we compete with them because we out-resource them, which is scary, but you can do it. We have more people. We have people that are immersed in this business. I've been doing this my whole life. Everybody that works in our business in a key position, this is their career. This is what we do. We're not trying to get the next job in the corporation. I'm a freaking glass guy. That's what I do. That comes through to customers. Okay. We are members of the community. We are going to go to the Chamber of Commerce meetings. We are going to volunteer for things. We are going to sponsor baseball teams. We are going to call on local people. We are going to get accounts. We're going to do everything conceivably possible to get our name out there and show them that, you know what the cool part is? We're the same price or better as the big guy, and we're your neighbor. We're your neighbor, for Christ's sake. Why wouldn't you use us? There's no advantage. The quality is the same or better. I'm going to do things they can't do. Our store's nicer, that's ours. But, all of these things hold true. And we're going to be here. We've been here for 60 plus years, and we're going to be here another 60.
And you do it without putting your competitor down. You're only emphasizing your strengths.
Absolutely, because it's sour grapes otherwise. You don't have to, right? Try calling one of their stores. Try calling a national store. See what you get. Okay? When you call one of our stores, you're going to get one of two things. You're going to get a person that talks to you that's in the neighborhood you're in. Hey, feature that, right? They know what's going on. They know that it's cloudy here. They know that it's rainy here. You mention what part of town. They know where it is. They aren't looking at notes on a call center screen.
Right.
You can tell. You can always tell, right? You're going to get a local person that wants your business. We can help you with that as our number one value. We offer service. I don't care what they call for. If they call for a pizza, I'm going to give them a local pizza place that's really good. We don't sell pizza, but I know that so-and-so has a great pizza and they have a sale going. We're going to offer service of some kind when we succeed, when we do our best. Do we miss? Sometimes. But you know what I mean? It's that figure out what they do, understand where their weaknesses are, and then take the things that you're uniquely gifted to be able to do and do that. And if you can't, you're probably in the wrong role. You probably should be working for somebody because you're probably beating your head against the wall.
Yeah, because all of your assets are on the line. Everything. Yeah. And
everything's on the line.
And I always tell, the first thing in a lot of seminars that I've done is I'll sit in the room and I'm like, if you're not invested in this industry, get out. If you don't see if this is just a hobby to you, leave. And it's true because you're getting in the way of your own market. Other people that want to be glass guys and serve the community, you're screwing it up for everybody else.
Well, and I think to a lesser degree now than in prior times, I think that distributors have been in large fault for saturating the industry. And a guy leaves somebody like us or the 800-pound gorilla or somebody like that, and he's seen an invoice and he said, wow, they can sell this thing that they paid $70 for 300. I want some of that. I could do this many jobs a day and be just fine. And you get guys that get into it because they have a truck and because they have a credit card. And oftentimes they didn't need a credit card because they get an open account. I think that's waned a bit, but I think irresponsible distribution has been not a good thing for the industry, because like it or not, some people that are in business shouldn't be in business. They should be working for somebody else. And by nature of the relationship that the industry has with its customers or its bill payers or whatever you want to call it, it's in their best interest to treat that guy like somebody that's been in business for 60 years and has made these significant investments in it, even though they're not the same. And that starts with a distributor. With a distributor going, who are you? You know,
well,
and
fill out this form. Give us your
going
business and
back.
tax license.
There's a friend of mine in the business, or was in the business for a lot of years, that started his business in about 1992, 93, and he left what was a large regional to do this, and he had a truck, and he named the business after himself, and he called to buy from us as a wholesaler. So we had wholesale and retail. Never shied away from that. It makes us better wholesalers. As a retailer, I'm a better wholesaler because I'm a retailer. I understand what these guys are up against, and I'm 100% committed to helping our customers be everything they can be, right? That's the only way you can approach it. So this guy calls, and at the time, I mean, we ran him through the gauntlet. We wouldn't sell it. We had a service advantage in his area. He was a couple hours outside of Kansas City. And we were not really interested in selling him because we had a customer in that area and we were trying to protect that customer. My competitor sold him with a phone call, with a single phone call. Eventually, he called and was getting poor service, and he goes, listen, if you take care of me, I promise I'll never screw you on payment, and I'm going to end up being your biggest customer. And that commitment was enough. We set him up. We offered basically competitive situation for him, and he did everything he said he was going to do. And he sold out last year. Great story, unbelievable success story. Started from zero, built it up to millions, did everything he said he was going to do, and got out when it just made sense. That kind of story, I have no problem with people doing that work. But when a guy could literally leave our business and go to the local distributor and have an account that afternoon and buy within 10 points of what we would buy a short at, what sense does that make?
Zero.
It doesn't help anything, especially when you consider they're treated the same as us, both on the distribution side as well as the, oh yeah, glass shop, glass shop, glass shop, glass shop. It's not a glass shop. It's a dude in a truck.
With a Capital One card.
And it's not, and I don't have a problem with mobile only guys. I have problems with people that don't look at a business as a business, and they're not in it for the long term per se. They're just going to live their dream out. And they're going to do this, and they're going to, and some of them will make it. Majority of them will end up being something less than that. Give up on it, bail out, walk away. That's just an opinion, but that's an opinion. I mean, I've seen it decades. It's not good for the industry. And I'm not saying little guys, because our lifeblood's little guys. I will help any glass shop that calls, because I think that's an obligation that those of us that have been around for a while owe to bring the industry up. I just think it's It's a thing. And I've yet to go into a glass shop of any kind. I've been in thousands over the years where you can't find something simple that will really help their business. And you do this. I see some of the stuff you're writing. You're trying to get them to understand the math and things like that. But seriously, it's like you look at this stuff and you go, hey, have you ever tried doing this? And they look at you like you're insane. And then they start thinking about it some more. And then they go, oh, right.
And then I'm still insane.
Yeah. Whether it's math, because math is probably, when you look at most of it, they have no idea. They don't know what their true operating cost is. They don't know what their margins are. They just know that I made $60 on this install when they need 80 or they need 180.
Well, and they know when business is dead. So just look at the last month. I didn't think the business was up last year. Well, so you only have 1 year to look at. Have you looked at 5 years, 3 years, and predictability of weather and the time of year, and it's Christmas, it's New Year's, and those are the same people that left your organization, open an account, and now they're sitting there going, life's not good anymore.
I had a guy that worked for me for a while as a tech. He was a nice kid. He called me a year and a half ago. He went back to a different market and decided to start his own business. And he called and he goes, hey, how much should I pay a salesperson? And I'm like, well, if you need a salesperson, you pay as much as you need to get the salesperson that you want. I said, how's that for, you gave me very little information. I'm going to give you the generalization. It's how much it takes to get the person that you want. That's how much you pay for a salesperson. The better question is, can you afford a salesperson, and what can that salesperson do for you? So I started asking questions. I said, what's your RPU? What? I said, what's your average sale price? How much do you make on average on a job? What's your sale price? How much do you make? So what's your margin? What's your gross profit? Okay. If you find a salesperson, once you figure that out, if you find a salesperson for X amount of money, you can do some quick math and divide that and figure out exactly how many jobs that person needs to bring to you to just pay for themselves, not make any money off of them, just to pay for themselves. There's thing one. And I'm talking to a wall, right? He never called back and he never hired a salesperson. He's not in business anymore. He works for another friend of mine. So some people should be in, some people shouldn't. There's also some great success stories. The guy I told you about earlier, great success story, unbelievable in any industry, American success story. Guy's blue collar, worked his ass off, had a set of values, built his business up, 20 years later sells and gets the magic ticket. It's awesome. That's the way this stuff's supposed to work. Equal number, it's like restaurants. Everybody wants to be a restaurateur. How do you make $1 million in a restaurant business? Start with 5. They fail. Unfortunately, we keep a pulse on them. But it's lesser degree. This stuff like calibration, stuff like technology, you're seeing more little guys truly invest in their business, which is great because it puts skin in the game, because they can no longer sell for beer money. They have to sell. They have to make it a real business, which is fantastic. And I think we should support that in any way possible, support the professionalism of our industry, because we're all better for it. Treat a customer like you really want their business, because at the end of the day, the guy that does the better job at convincing them that they want the business is going to get it. They really are. And the guy that does a good job, once they give you the trust to do that, the guy that does a good job at earning that maybe trust that they give you when you start is going to get them back the next time without another phone call. They're going to just call straight. That's how you win. It's hard, but it's worth it. It becomes something bigger than the sum of its parts.
And it's mindset. It's
absolute mindset.
Yep. And that's
what a lot of people
need to know.
If you have an outright desire to be fantastic at something, you're going to be better than the guy that's just trying to make a living.
Yep.
Profit is what happens when you do all the things right. If you focus on the bottom before you focus on the things that make up the bottom, you're going to lose because it's going to push things off, right? We don't argue over warranty claims. We give every customer the benefit of the doubt. I have eaten so much crap over the years that I was like, and you've got to talk to your techs and you go, I know you didn't do it, but that's not what this is about. And they get it. They finally get it, right? But we don't hide from mistakes. We make mistakes every day. We eat cars, we eat moldings, we eat damage that there's no conceivable way we could do. We do it all the time. And our warranty rate's like 2%. But still, you still get them. I get them all the time. Don't argue about it. Because if somebody else is an asshole, it doesn't make you the asshole. You're only the victim of that when you change your MO because of it. When you treat every customer like they're going to steal from you, you've lost. It's over because no one likes to be treated like that.
Thank you for tuning in to the Industry Pricing Benchmark, Is There a Future for NAGS? With guest host David Leach, Chief Operating Officer of Don's Mobile Glass. You've been listening to Shatterproof, the Auto Glass Journey for Independence podcast, brought to you by the Independent Glass Association and me, Gary Hart, your host. If you haven't already liked this podcast or haven't subscribed, like this episode and hit that subscribe button so anytime we update the content, you'll be the first to get access to all of this great media and industry information. We also want to thank our sponsors of this podcast, eDirect Glass, who is also the maker of Glass Part Match, which is free to the industry, so get your account today at www.iga.org/GPM. And Augie by AirPro, that amazing on-the-glass targeting recalibration system allowing you to work anywhere with the support you need to succeed. You can find all the links referenced in this podcast in the description or comments below. Again, thank you for tuning in and supporting the IGA so we can continue to provide quality information and educational materials for the independent automotive glass industry.